So I have had seen as a stakeholder I've had a lot of experiences with research approaches online and places like social media. Some of them have been great, some of them have been terrible, and some of them very much trudge in the world of just leaping in Olympic fashion over ethical boundaries. And so I thought a really interesting conversation to potentially have about utilizing this space, all the more so in the world of a global pandemic and stuff like that, in terms of given that's where our reach is and how to kind of start to connect with people in ways that they value as well too. So first off, I just wanted to acknowledge where I have the privilege of living, working, and playing. By all means, please feel free to share your own land acknowledgement in the chat as well too, as well as you're welcome to introduce yourself. Today is an extension of an initiative created by CanChild and Kids Brain Health Network, which is a part of the Family Engagement and Research Certificate Program. So this is our Community of Practice Extended Learning Series. What we kind of wanted from this was to kind of consider what were some areas of leadership that had some well-defined gaps, and we were looking to fill them where we can. And so this social media was one of the first thoughts that came to mind in terms of connecting with people. So a bit about me, no official disclosures to mention here today, but I work as a research engagement strategist within the course. And so what I do with that is to work with researchers as well as parents, trainees, a lot of different people, kind of essentially helping them realize their goals, not only within the course, but beyond the course, in terms of how to partner well, where to find opportunities to partner, and things like that. So my interest in health research came out of my own lived experience. Being a bereaved parent, I spent quite a few years supporting work with my son and still continue to do so. Moving forward, I'm now an adult patient looking for opportunities within helping to support areas of health that affect me personally now at this point. My university background has been very part-time as a caregiver. I kind of started getting my feet wet in seeing what I was good at, essentially, and some of those focuses have kind of taken me towards an understanding of Canadian healthcare systems. And knowledge mobilization actually is my most recent one, and having a really fabulous time doing so as well. So the big question to start off with essentially is, how are researchers currently utilizing social media? Now that can be a bit of a mixed bag in terms of what this space can be used for so far. Research Twitter would be kind of top of my list in terms of some of the conclusions that have come out of, say, for instance, scoping review that was done in 2019, talking about how a lot of it is around sentiments about, sharing their own work, very celebratory based and things like that. But there is definitely a need to kind of understand that future analysis could look at what we're doing to optimize our outreach through social media. And I think a lot of that has kind of shifted greatly within the pandemic as well too, as we've seen a real dire need to get KT out into the world and fast and efficient in the most effective ways possible, essentially. So where I kind of got my start within social media was this. Actually, I got into research on a dare, which is a really strange story for me to tell. But at the same time, I had a Facebook friend who I'd actually never met in person, but we aligned a lot in our thoughts and our experiences as parents. And just says, hey, do you want to help moderate a Facebook group? I'm like, yeah, well, why not? Sounds good. And turns out it was actually a research study on if you brought parents together and researchers together and you just kind of put them in a social media space and you said, what if you kind of helped to facilitate conversations that were relevant to the lives of the stakeholders that you were looking to connect with. And what kind of came out of that was we collectively had a greater understanding of one another. So researchers had kind of a greater depth of understanding of what life is like beyond that 1 hour limitation of a clinic appointment. They got to get to know families to a greater nuance, where And this was actually a wonderful side effect of kind of creating the social media engagement, is that we were able to start projects off on a more authentic foot right off the bat, because you don't have that, for lack of a better phrase, you don't have that awkward dating phase where you're just trying to get to know each other and say, is this going to work out? Things like that. And you don't have those kind of relational worries that come off the bat, because you already know each other already. So we created Parents Partnering in Research, and it has been a continually funded program in order to help move new research, create a new space for recruitment strategies. Also just kind of create a space where we can support each other better and create more of a community mindset as well too. And in some cases, we've gone as far as participating in projects aligned with developing policies that support United Nations conventions on the rights of persons with disabilities, things like that. Like our projects have ranged quite widely. So the conclusion from our paper is basically that it grew into an established community, and it described a lot of valuable experiences from both ends. From the parents' side, what this really created was an accessible space to do so. And every time I share about this group, I like to say the words, because it's about as awkward as you can say it, and in a room full of scientists, it's research in your underwear. Because honestly, it's a space where you kind of have to say, frankly, it takes a lot as a parent for someone like myself was to find not only regular babysitter, but a specialized babysitter, to take time off work, to drive to a campus, to find the tiny little room that you signed up for in order to make something like that happen, where this became more of an inclusive space to do so. It does have its limitations in terms of access, but I think that's kind of where, for me, on my end, and that some of that is incumbent on me as well too, in terms of kind of helping to build capacity, is to share that story throughout. And there are aspects of how that story gets shared that will be, in essence, incalculable in terms of people who might not engage as much, but are still sharing things outwardly. I still see some of those connections from other groups where I know that they have shared things from other groups as well too. And yeah, and basically it becomes a space for a lot of opportunity and a lot of flexibility as well too. But yeah, this continues on to just talking about ongoing relationships and things that have kind of come out of these from within this group. We've actually had quite the reach globally now. At this point, we have folks from Croatia, from France, Australia, et cetera, et cetera. Oh. Sorry, did I miss something? Okay. So I wanted to talk about a term within Facebook specifically. Now, I will admit I am not the biggest Mark Zuckerberg fan, but he does do a really great marketing plan for people who know how to engage people authentically. So you can see groups for any number of subjects where it's like quarantine karaoke and has like 2 million people and stuff like that. But what they do is actually formally recognize people who create systems where you have that consistent level of engagement, and they actually invite you to become something called a power admin. So I achieved power admin status, which makes me feel like a Super Mario game, but that's another story. But at the same time, what it does is actually help increase training. They do offer free opportunities to learn how to increase your methods for engagement and things like that. There is a really wonderful community space that they've harvested as well too, where you can start tackling like little problems about basic human interactions. How do you create supportive spaces, resources for during the pandemic, et cetera, et cetera. But one thing I ended up doing when I wanted to plan this webinar was actually ask a bunch of power admins what their thoughts were about researchers, et cetera.
I don't know.
And so one thing that we talked about is,
I'll just grab it afterwards. Okay. Yep.
One thing we talked about was what do you value in your connections with researchers online? And one of the number one things that people wanted to convey to you was that personal support groups are sacred spaces, and that you are a guest. Essentially, was the big thing. They have had worries about prior history with lack of commitment or competency when it comes to certain. Oh, no problem, Andrea. Invasion of privacy, cynicism over impact, perceived lack of value of the people that you connect with, and things like that, where it's more, I'm here just as I'm here, but I just want to get something from you, but there's no reciprocal relationship in that respect. And some of that has came with a few stories about, oh gosh, I'm trying to think of my top two terrible stories that I've actually seen it happen was, hi everybody, I know you all have kids with rare diagnoses and that's a wonderful experience. If I paid you $5, would you spit in a tube for me? Like, yeah, no RAB, no nothing to mention, but just this is what it is. And people were like, sure, that's fine. But at the same time, I ended up actually chewing this person out, saying that's not how any of this is accomplished. And one of the other stories was actually in a bereaved parents group, and basically said, I lost a cat once, and so I can feel your pain about losing a child. And this is the story. And I kind of, it hurts to hear those things. At the same time, I tried to kind of say, like, I know you're probably a grad student and this is your first time, but that's probably not the best approach. If you want to talk to me about, how to do this, I would be happy to lend you my time. So moving forward, people want to kind of know that their time is being valued and that it's impactful. Some people have been very skeptical about REB approval. Not everyone is aware of that, but I think it's really important to offer that to people, even if just whether or not they know about it. Some ask for credentials, and some really doubt grad students. I've been wondering exactly how that changes, but I think that's going to vary depending on value systems of the people that you're talking to. But I think that's something that's worth pulling out of the conversation as to why, if you connect with somebody. Yeah, and then one of the most expressed frustrations that came out of the conversation was that feeling of being like an info conduit and less like a partner, and routinely devalued for your contribution. So people want to feel like they're involved. They want to see change. They want to be a part of the change, and they want to feel like their time with you has been meaningful. Emotional well-being of members was another piece. A lot of moderators mentioned members not feeling pressured by researchers to go do something. So essentially, like, respect the no in certain circumstances. Some people who claim to be researchers actually turned out to be reporters, which I think is horrendously creepy. No respect for spoon theory. I'm going to explain that a little bit as well too in another slide. And a desire to see and feel connected, sort of denting the universe and feeling like, you're part of something bigger. So you want to make sure that that is protected with people that you talk with. So spoon theory, if you have not heard before, is actually from the chronic illness community. And basically, if you can imagine a jar full of spoons, and everybody has like, every spoon is a unit of energy. And everybody have, say you have 10 spoons in a day, and it takes 5 spoons for you to take a shower, and then you have to kind of allot your energy for the rest of the day. And so it becomes kind of this conversation about budgeting your abilities for the day. And I think that is an important piece for anybody. And all the more so, actually, it was really interesting. Ed Young, who was a reporter, wrote something about long COVID patients and how they kind of worked their way into trying to innovate because no one else was looking to do so. And one of the things that he mentioned in his article that was so heartbreakingly prevalent in terms of or relevant in terms of what I thought was really important there was the fact that it talked about long COVID patients trading off in their efforts, and when they were drained, that someone else would take the role and things like that. So it's really kind of important to consider what sort of bandwidth people have within whatever community you're accessing. Oh, and yeah, I mentioned the long COVID piece already here as well too. This is the article if you are looking for it as well. And I will actually have these slides available on SlideShare as well. So when it comes to Facebook, some of the key points that I really kind of wanted to bring to light here was that you don't always need to start your own group. With stuff like that, people have this idea that this needs to be our space and our space alone. Chances are, in some cases, people already have something that they valued already set up, and that new community. There's no need to necessarily double it. It depends on your goals and how much you're willing to invest in a certain type of conversation. Kindness and honesty, transparency will truly 1000% be remembered, even when it's an awkward exchange. Leaving an open resource where you can always be contacted is always a thing. If you have any questions, my door is open, my office hours, whatever works specifically to connect you to people, they want to have that space, even if it's a no to begin with, that you could potentially be a reference in the future, helps you build a community that wasn't there previously. And to also share outcomes. Outcomes are a huge deal, even if it's not, if someone doesn't participate, just come back and say, hey, just want to let you know that this happened. This is what they learned. Please feel free to share it with your community, because I know that they would value it greatly. And denting the universe. I talk about this a lot, but basically people want to see that impact. They want to kind of derive meaning from their experiences, be it chronic illness, disability, things like that. They want to be able to make sense of things that are relevant to their lives, and any way that you can aid in that process through research and community is just a huge message in their minds. Now, we talk a lot about with research being, engagement being kind of developing a level playing field, which I think is a fair assessment to say, but I'd like to kind of bring a slightly different lens to this as well too. I came across this in a research engagement journal, and I thought it was really a great idea, the sand pit, because nobody walks glamorously through sand. There's nobody who does that really well. Sometimes people need support. You can't walk together with someone, trudging forward and leave the person behind. You have to do it together, and you have to both look awkward together. And I just think that to me speaks so much to what this whole process can be. But that time together is worth the experience as well. But this actually came from a paper talking about we're not hard to reach, but we may find it hard to trust. Involving and engaging seldom listen to community voices in translational health research. Really interesting paper when it came to connections, and worth a read as well too. So yeah, the community sandpit is based on principles of social innovation and co-production. And so yeah, that's worth the time there as well. So some of the methods that they talked about within the sandpit design was an emphasis on co-design, valuing community organizations as experts rather than gatekeepers, put research and context that have practical interest to the community, things like that, value the time and expertise. All of that plays out in people really connecting authentically with the work when they feel like they're a part of it. I also love this as well, this last point, talking about having people be able to pitch back ideas as well, to feel like, that their thoughts are meaningful as well too. So what was the common thread between the study and the power admins is that emotional connection and investment in change and the potential to improve quality of life needs to be recognized and validated as a part of the experience. That would be I would stitch this on a pillow, quite honestly, in terms of how important it is that people truly find this meaningful and they want to make sure that it's worth their time. So some of the suggestions that came out from the power admins was don't underestimate the power of a scheduled video chat, just to kind of create an introduction beforehand. So that would be top of the list. Respecting the no and being cool with that. But as I mentioned before, sharing outcomes still is a way to build trust and say, hey, I still value the connection that we had. Offering opportunities for connections, things like Zoom, Microsoft Teams, phone call, email, whatever works for them, but providing those options. Creating opportunities for connection, learn their story. One thing that we've actually kind of committed to do through CanChild was with the Parents Partnering and Research Group, and this was obviously pre-COVID, was that the times that we could connect through things like conferences, we tried to be very mindful of inviting people out for, say, like a pizza night. Because we kind of knew each other already online, it was just a really great way to connect with people in person. Obviously, that's a little different right now, but to understand who they are and why they come to the decisions they do, helps you to kind of learn a bit more about, the people you're working with as well too. And then share reasonable expectations of time commitment as well to start the conversation about remuneration. All of those things kind of play out in terms of ways to kind of create expectation of what you want from them. But really, to summarize this all, don't be the human equivalent of a recruitment poster. All information, one-sided, non-conversational, all about you and your work. You want this to be an extension of patient and family-centered care. And recruitment is really an extension of that dance. And I wanted to talk a bit today about social media basics because I find that there are some basic barriers that need to be considered here as well too. So some of this may be not new to some of you at all. For some people, this might be, oh, somebody said it, thank you so much. So thought it might be worth mentioning here as well. Hashtags. People always seem to want to create their own, but that's not always a necessary thing to do. It really depends on what your goal is. So the hashtag, basically the role is to create a searchable space for a certain subject. So I'm a big fan of the show Ted Lasso. It seems like a lot of people are right now. And there is a new hashtag called Med Lasso for medical practitioners who love Ted Lasso. And it is my daily amusement at this point, the fact that I discovered that. So that's a very specified area of the world that says that this is what we love and this is what we do. So when it comes to a project, if you are looking to talk to people and access people, you want to not necessarily create a hashtag that they've never heard of. No one's going to search for it if they don't read minds. So what you want to do is access hashtags that they already do. And not to make them too long if you do create your own, things like that. One great way to access people that I recommend is to go to Google top hashtags on Instagram or things like that. You will find with certain subjects like parenting, for instance, you're going to find where people are kind of hanging out and stuff like that. Don't put 50 hashtags in your thing, but at the same time, kind of find some of the basic ones. Some top tools to leverage on Facebook would definitely be Facebook page. It's a great place to just talk about what you do and create an accessible space to do that. People are intrigued by the concept of the science that's going on. Not everybody has an opportunity, and to learn more about it is a privilege, but you want to create more open spaces for that to happen. So to just talk about what you do creates a space for communication in that respect. Their groups can have their benefit, but depends on how long your study is for and how much you want to invest in it in terms of engagement. Rooms is another interesting one. They are copying from Twitter, creating an audio-based space to just kind of have like a teleconference sort of platform. I haven't engaged with it too much, but it definitely has its opportunities there as well. Instagram. This is just kind of a really basic slideshow of recruitment that some people have opted for, but I think it's one to kind of share as to what you can do. So there's like a slide option where you can do multiple pictures, but this is something somebody did here. Oop, I lost my cursor. So really simple in terms of how to kind of be where people are. And I find with youth, with parents, definitely a place that you can maximize on as well too. I've never seen it as an issue with ethics board as well. TikTok is a growing one as well. Little knowledge nuggets. So for those of you who find the concept to be, there's not necessarily any dancing involved, but it can be a really great place to create moments of knowledge. Now, at this point, I believe it is, you have a 30-second, a 1 minute, and a 3-minute option in order to create videos for. And the limitations are boundless at this point, really, in terms of what you create the space for. I do it for my podcast, so I create little bits of knowledge about childhood disability or about podcast episodes, things like that. It's a really interesting space for the pandemic. I will say as well, too, it can be a bit of a dumpster fire in terms of people with their anonymous comments and things like that. You can filter through stuff like that. But this is kind of one of the things, like this is an epidemiologist that I follow and has just talks about the knowledge moments. And if you are a wordy person like myself, I can be a talker and it can take a bit to get to my point. It has helped me so much in order to kind of learn how to be a lot more concise.
Ray, we can't hear.
Oh. My apologies there. I'm not sure exactly what happened, but you can kind of get the idea of what you have, like a green screen. You can do screenshots. You can explain a lot of different options with that. I think it's because I'm using my earbuds. I'm not entirely sure how best to fix that there.
If you take them out, then we can hear what's playing through.
Oh, yeah.
This has to come through your computer.
Oh, all right. Let's give it a try here again.
Hey, Dr. Cat, epidemiologist. Let's talk about Iceland. In addition to Iceland being beautiful and a really popular tourist destination, it's also one of the world's most vaccinated countries. According to public health sources, 96% of eligible women and 90% of eligible men have received the vaccine, which means about 86% of their total population is vaccinated. So when you see a COVID-19 outbreak in a country like this, does that mean the vaccine is not working? According to data from the Public Health Iceland website from the past month, 67% of their total cases have been in vaccinated people. Remember that in Iceland, there's a lot more vaccinated people than unvaccinated people. So we need to analyze the data using the proper denominators. So if you divide those 1,503 vaccinated cases by the denominator of all vaccinated people in Iceland, which is over 250,000, you get a rate of 6 per 100,000. Doing the same thing in the unvaccinated group, you'll notice the denominator is much smaller because there's a lot less unvaccinated people. So if you divide that, you get 18 per 100,000. So you'll see that the real rate of unvaccinated people is 3 times higher than that of vaccinated people. I also want to mention that among those vaccinated cases, there were no hospitalizations or deaths, and the public health department stated that most of those cases were asymptomatic or mild. I hope that helps you understand what's going on in Iceland and how we need to interpret data within the proper context to draw conclusions.
So it's pretty cool, hey, in terms of just the little bits of knowledge that people can work their way through. And what's great about that too is that a lot of times people will ask questions and you can like make another video or reply video to what people are saying. So there's a real great space for talking to people. I talk from such a niche area. I don't get a lot of controversy, but I as you can see, things like COVID, you might get a lot more battles here and there. So just to beware. Twitter is another great spot to help people learn about your work, but also to follow your colleagues as well. And so help stakeholders find your colleagues too. So that helps them to grow their wealth of knowledge as to the kind of the bigger world of academia. And the last point as well too, please live tweet conferences. I will say this with stakeholders is that the ability to access conferences is absolute privilege. And that's something that not everyone has access to. While there are programs out that exist, things like Patients Included, which is patientsincluded.org is actually a certification that conferences can get in order to get a red check mark that says that they have opportunities to bring more patients to conferences. But the more that you can bring, more information that you can bring to people, the more they're going to be thankful for that opportunity to gain some more knowledge as well too, where they might not have had an opportunity to previously. And I thought it would be worth gathering some advice as well too from people on Twitter in terms of what they would want to tell you in this particular circumstance as to how you engage people online. A lot of great points to talk about. Just they're not just people on, to check off on a box. They are human beings and they just want to learn and be a part of it. So Kyle talks about what would be beneficial through Twitter as well. And of course, Brandon's on here too. And tweet chats is actually a really great option as well in terms of networking with people. So you get a chance to kind of stretch your legs a little bit in terms of your opinions or your knowledge and sharing that out with the world. And people have a way to kind of just kind of be flies on the wall in terms of understanding what you're talking about. So the primary or the end goal with everything that you want to do connecting with people is this basic formula, which is EI20. Which in some ways it kind of makes me giggle. It's like EIO, but that's a whole other story. I'm a bit goofy that way. Empowerment, influence, impact, and outcomes are the things that you want to consider as you connect with people online. And these would be a few key takeaways to consider as you consider what sort of goals that you want to set when you're connecting with people through social media platforms. So I'm going to ask you guys here too, but by all means, please feel free to add it to the chat or to come off mute as well too. And kind of maybe consider a couple of these questions as to, because I think part of what's really important in this conversation is to talk about solutions and things that have worked or not worked for us as well too. So is there anything that comes to mind with either question for you? I think one of the biggest challenges for me has been building capacity in terms of accessing new spaces. I would love to see more interconnected nature. Oh, Diane, what would your thought be from either question?
Hi, I was part of the sort of parents or partnering in research Facebook group, and I remember the survey we did and hearing from families that they would like researchers to be more open and engaged of their own lives, which was really a challenging thing for researchers in that in that sort of space, and I was wondering how you would encourage them to do so, and what feels academic and what feels like you can't do that. It just, when you raise that about sort of sharing more personal stories, I think that was a challenge for researchers.
Yeah, and I think that I think anything that humanizes you, quite honestly, really plays into that. It took me a bit in some aspects, like because there was some professional to personal overlap for me, for instance. I had to warm up the space because it was just one of those things, like my son's neurologist, for instance, we are part of the same research network. And he was the judge on one of my first research posters. And I joked about, because he's one of the friendliest persons I think I've ever met in my life, I said he needed to work on his grumpy judge face and like really be more stern. And that was enough to kind of break that that relationship, that tenseness that was sort of underlying in that respect. Or so I do it with humor, but everybody's going to find their own brand with that as well too, in terms of what that means. Be it, oh, this meme, this inspirational quote really resonated with me today, or nice picture of a sunset. What am I baking today? A lot people just want to see beyond the work stuff. I mean, you don't necessarily need to share your lives, share your kids, or things like that. Everybody can have boundaries that work with them, and then that's the basic nature of social media. But when you can even talk about things like and like, oh my gosh, I have this grant and this is all that I have to go through, and sharing like just a short video of you scrolling through several CIHR pages helps someone to go, wow, you guys do a lot of work there. That's a lot. What do they ask you? That's enough to kind of cast a picture as to understanding that it's not just, I talk to someone, they're like, yeah, here's $1 million. We're good to go. Everything's fine. Anything that paints a picture of understanding what your world looks like is helpful, really, in that way, into understanding. And you can say that someone's a bit of a, they're great scientists, but they're a bit of a nerd or whatnot, things like that.
I think that sort of points to your point about getting some face-to-face time, because all we were on was Facebook. So it's a little harder to do that kind of jostling back and forth, right? But when you see someone or go for a coffee or whatever, that's really a time you can do that well.
Absolutely. And that's one thing CanShell does really well in person, like, with their family engagement days and things like that. It's tougher to be more mindful. And I think that there is, I think one needs to kind of set realistic goals in terms of what that can look like in terms of how you engage, because you do need that back and forth. You can't just throw something at somebody and be like, here it is, you're welcome. In terms of information and stuff like that, you kind of just need to bring a bit of a pulse to the conversation. And so if it's like every other day you just share one bit about your life, that creates a world of difference. The one thing about the work that you're doing, just to set those goals depending on what you're looking to convey or communicate, that helps a lot. But Karen asks in the chat, do you find one social media outlet is better than the other when it comes to recruiting participants? And I think it varies depending on the audience. I really love that suggestion as a way to build relationships with participants. Awesome. I think that you kind of need to look at the basic goal. So, okay, for instance, Kinga and I are working on a measure for family-centered care, which is true. And one of the things that we wanted to talk about was who are we, who is our primary audience with that? And I think that came with saying, okay, how the message ended up being for, how do you want to measure your experiences in healthcare? And so that came with talking to parents and saying, and creating that message and saying that, kind of that basic thing. So it's not about, just putting a poster out and saying this is, our REB approval, basically anything that you would see on any hospital wall. It's asking an important question and kind of finding the right audience for it. So like, if it would be parenting, Instagram is a really great place. If you want something a bit more in depth with people who are already engaged, who kind of have a bit understanding of the research world and stuff like that, Twitter is generally where, kind of the more a higher end engagement tends to be. Facebook is more of a general neutral space as well too. I like to emphasize the fact that to have more of that information exchange very as public in its settings as possible creates more of an opportunity to create for other people to find it, be inspired, and share it to others. So it kind of varies as well. And Karen says, for me, mobilization and connection of platforms really depend on the individuals and groups I'm connecting with. Yeah, no, that would be very well. And to support what Rachel is saying, this site has helped me to advise populations using tools. Thank you for that, Bryn. That's awesome. Anything that helps to connect in that respect is always hugely helpful. And so basically, to determine a goal, to make sure that your connections are reciprocal, all of these kind of things help to build trust and to see what people value from these experiences. Now I'm going to come off screen share here, and if anybody needs a connection to me here as well, you've got all of my information here. Feel free to, I'll pause for a moment to screenshot if you need it. So is there any other big challenges that are coming in your way in terms of these conversations today that we'd be able to be helpful with? Even if it's just the basic stuff, we don't judge. Genevieve.
And Ray, I haven't used a lot of social media because I'm really kind of behind the times and I don't really get into it very much, but I realize I need to get more into it. But how do researchers come across as being authentic? I guess that it's not just about what I want and what I'm going to get this information from you because I'm doing this study and I need your experience versus I want to partner with you. Like, because I find that there's still that role distinction and that you're the parent, but I need something from you versus I'm working with you on this together. Like, so how would, what would be some strategies for a researcher to become or sound or really be authentic in the social media, particularly because they're an inclusive group, they're private, they're protecting that space, as you mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think part of what helps is to find a knowledge broker on your behalf. So for if you are a guest in a support group, for instance, it's good to talk to one of the moderators beforehand. And this is where, say, like scheduling a Zoom call with them would be great. And just to bring context to what you want to do, sharing your base values as to why and what you plan to do with this information afterwards helps them to kind of be a little bit more excited than just flat text, because you've put a face and a human and a personal drive to something that was just mere words beforehand. Anything that's essentially going to give you an opportunity to provide a heartbeat to your work is so beneficial, because what ends up happening, and that's what I find with a lot of parent partners that we work with, is that people get really excited about understanding a broader world of the science, that when they finally have an opportunity to start connecting in larger capacity, things like conferences and stuff like that, you can see for lack of a better phrase, and I apologize for some of my FAR grads who are here today, for the newbies, you see a level of excitement and personal restraint to not want to ask for an autograph from a scientist. And that's the joy. It's not just excitement, it's the joy that you want to instill in people, because that they've been connected with in a really good way that drives them right in the heart. And that's the stuff that you want to see, and that's the stuff that makes them feel like they are a part of the community. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's great.
Mhm. Kinga, you have your hand up.
Yeah, this might be going a bit off topic, so maybe we need like a part 2, like a sequel to this one, to this webinar. But I'm wondering what you, Ray, and anybody else can say about not just recruiting participants through social media, but actually collecting information from social media. And like, has anybody here done it? How did it work with your ethics board? Just because what we're coming up against is, for example, I'm part of the Ken Child Parents Participating in Research Facebook group. And, people say amazing things on there, right? But if I don't have permission to use it in my research, then I can ask, well, would you like to do, would you like to do an interview? Can we talk about this so I can actually record what you're saying for research purposes? But I'm wondering if there's a way to actually, use, stuff from discussion groups, or to like organize like virtual, I don't know, events where you can collect information.
I can say, for instance, like Twitter is a public platform. I know that from a research standpoint, there is some fiery hoops that you need to jump through as a scientist in order to use some of them. I know I work with one scientist in the US that actually has that, and was looking at, for instance, tweets during the 2016 election in the US. And boy, that stuff's bananas, but that's another story. But yeah, just that some stuff is public record, but when it comes to like the stuff within private groups, that is a different conversation in terms of, I mean, we try to have a good practice of asking people personally in terms of certain information, but I think informal references can be pertinent depending on the conversation. But Bryn, what's your thoughts on the subject?
Oh, well, I was just that's a great question. We're running in, you run into that a lot. And to, like you were saying, these public platforms, and I think TCPS, what it sort of is based on, like the ethics boards, is the expectation of privacy. So if there's a private Facebook group, you couldn't go onto that as a researcher to, without telling them and getting a permission. But if it's public, then I personally would probably let them know if I was going in a group, if there's membership and you could engage with them, just because it's, sort of that, it's just nice to do. It builds that relationship as well. Maybe down the road there's more. But I've been starting to see some, like, Twitter, for example, you can look at hashtags and kind of get people's, opinions and things like that. And I came across a paper the other day that someone was going on Reddit to, and I believe it was all open discussion groups, but they were looking, because there hasn't been a lot of work on long COVID. So they were going on Reddit and actually seeing what people were talking about, people who've had COVID, to start building a database of symptoms, so people know where to start maybe doing their research. So there's kind of some cool stuff that way, I think. So just to give a couple extra examples there. Yeah, because ethics is kind of squirrely a bit when it comes to.
I appreciate that. That's really great insights, and I think you bring a really great point in terms of what's going to make those spaces all the more important when we can, like, can I join in? Being a really important invitation to ask for, because there's so much, trust is such a hasty balance to consider right now. I mean, just with information and disinformation, that's all another big battle with all of this as well too, and some of that does stand right at trust and relationships. Diane, you have your hand up.
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to share, when we started our Parents Partnering with Facebook page quite a few years ago, we hadn't thought about ethics off the top, because we weren't really thinking we were going to evaluate it, but we were getting such rich information from parents about what was important to them. And we felt like we need to be able to share this if if we want to move the field forward. So we had to go back to ethics, and we had to sort of put stuff out on the Facebook page, but we did a survey, and of course they could choose not to participate in the survey. So that was sort of opting out. But the feeling that there was so much rich information there that we would miss if we couldn't kind of harvest it a bit that way, but we needed definitely permission from participants. And I'm wondering whether we actually put anything in the terms of reference.
Yep. Yeah, that it was a part of that your information may be used as a part of research and things like that, but that we would ask permission to do so.
Yeah, and I think actually we did lose one or two people because of that. They didn't like that.
Yep. And that's fair.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm. I'm just trying to think. Diane, were you a part of the review that happened? I think it was in, was it 2018? Something like that as well. It was talking about social media.
I don't know what you mean, the review of.
Oh, it was a review with Sarah. Oh gosh, what was it? It was basically about the group. I think it was just Jen.
Yeah, no, I was part of that as well.
Okay.
There were sort of 4 or 5 different groups doing social media in childhood disability.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, there was we ended up doing being a part of a larger review of kind of practices that were at the time. So there was a cast interest in terms of what people were up to. But I think that we haven't really created any consistency in methods in terms of how people are accessed and what we do in the approaches and things like that. I just want to make sure that it's kind at the end of the day. That's my big priority in terms of this conversation, is ensuring that it's has life and inspires.
Sorry, just thinking of when you're talking about publications, because that's sort of another issue when you're dealing with partners, and do parents want to be part of research articles, and how do you figure out authorship order, which is important to researchers, may not be important where parents are in the thing, that how do you actually go about figuring those things out, because they should be acknowledged for their expertise as well, for sure.
Absolutely. And I should mention as well too, with some of the aspects of distance nowadays, one of our Ken Child team members actually has a youth advisory panel with her study. And one of the things that they ended up doing at one point, just given the distance during the pandemic, was they all got Uber Eats together one night, just to have kind of that social space. And I thought that was about the sweetest thing I think I've ever heard in my life. Anything that you can do to cultivate just kind of those little social moments here and there plays really highly to people's opportunity for and desire for involvement. Well, it seems that unless there's any more questions or anything like that, I think we can call it 5 minutes early, and well, I'm going to enjoy some lunch, but that's just my time zone. So thank you very much for joining here today. I'm so thankful that we could have this conversation, and I've learned so much here as well too. And we will be putting this recording, I imagine, on the Ken Child website as well, through our Family Research Rounds section. So we'll make sure to find out through the Ken Child profile on Twitter or on Facebook. We'll share from there as well too, when everything is up. So thank you very much, everyone. Have a wonderful week, and we'll connect online.